The rain came in sideways that night. October in Chicago always arrived this way, not gently, not with any warning, but as a verdict. The kind that pressed itself against glass and reminded you that everything warm was borrowed. The Meridian Group's annual gala occupied the 43rd floor of the Aldine Tower, and from where Olivia Hayes stood beside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city below looked like scattered embers fighting to stay lit. She held a glass of Montrachet she hadn't touched. The jazz quartet behind her was playing something Coltrane adjacent, and the room hummed with the particular frequency of people who wanted to be seen being present. Olivia had attended this event every year for the past 11. She had organized it for 3 of those years. She knew the catering manager's children's names, and she knew which board members drank too much by the second hour, and she knew, without looking, the precise radius within which someone was about to approach her with a request disguised as a compliment. She was 43 years old. She had built Meridian's technology division from a 30-person satellite office into a 900-person operation that accounted for 38% of the company's total revenue. She owned a penthouse on Lakeshore Drive. She had a personal assistant named Margot who anticipated her calendar needs before Olivia herself recognized them. She was, by every measurable standard, exactly where she had intended to be, which made it difficult to explain why she was standing at the edge of a party she had helped design, watching a man she did not recognize. He was near the far end of the room. Speaking with someone from the analytics division, she recognized the analyst, but not the man. Medium height, a suit that fit well but wasn't custom, brown hair that needed a cut by approximately 2 weeks. He wasn't performing anything. He wasn't angling toward anyone. He was simply listening, nodding at appropriate intervals, and when he smiled, it reached somewhere behind his eyes without asking permission. What struck Olivia was not attraction. Not exactly. It was the particular irritation of encountering something she could not immediately categorize. She asked Margot, quietly, through text, the man near the east windows, speaking with Dennis Park. "Who is that?" "Daniel Carter. Senior Analyst, Strategic Accounts. 4 years with the company. Quiet file. Do you need his full profile?" "No." She put her phone away and crossed the room. He noticed her approach at the right moment, not too early, which would have suggested he'd been watching, and not too late, which would have suggested he hadn't registered who she was. He excused himself from Dennis Park with the kind of ease that came not from social training but from genuine indifference to hierarchy. "Miss Hayes," he said. "Daniel." She offered her hand. His grip was firm without demonstration. "I don't think we've met formally." "We haven't, though I sat in the 3rd row for your presentation at the Q2 Strategy Summit. Did I say something useful?" He considered this with what appeared to be actual consideration. "You said the company had confused momentum with direction." I wrote it down. Olivia looked at him for a moment longer than was strictly conventional. Around them, the party continued its careful performance of importance. "I've been looking at your department's last quarter numbers," she said. "The Harrison account retention, that was your modeling." "Partly," he said, which was the kind of answer that either indicated genuine humility or sophisticated strategy. She couldn't yet tell which. They spoke for 20 minutes. About the Harrison account, about a structural inefficiency he'd identified in the client reporting cycle that she'd also noticed but hadn't yet acted on. He was precise without being pedantic. He asked one question that made her pause before answering. She noticed, somewhere around minute 17, that he hadn't once attempted to impress her, which was, in her experience, the single most effective way to do so. The rain intensified against the glass. The quartet transitioned into something slower. Olivia was not accustomed to saying things she hadn't planned to say. "Is my age a problem?" she asked. The question came out quieter than she'd intended. Not a flirtation exactly. More like something she'd been thinking and her voice had decided to release without consulting her. Daniel Carter did not answer immediately. He looked at her for one moment. Then, he looked at his watch. It was a plain watch, the kind that told time without apology. "I'm sorry," he said. And he meant it. She could hear that he meant it. My daughter is waiting for me. He set his glass down on the tray of a passing server, buttoned his jacket with one hand, and walked toward the elevators. Olivia Hayes stood by the window and watched him leave. She was not accustomed to being left. The Montrachet in her glass was still untouched. Outside, the city continued its argument with the rain. The jazz played on. Around her, people laughed and networked and performed their ambitions for one another. She stood very still and thought about a man who had looked at his watch. Not at her. At his watch. As if something else, somewhere else, mattered more. The jazz quartet finished their set. Around her, conversations renewed themselves. A man she half recognized from the legal division said her name and moved toward her with the familiar intent of someone who wanted a word about a budget allocation. She answered his question with the portion of her attention it required and did not let on that she was still thinking, beneath the professional surface of the exchange, about a plain watch and a man's steady hands and the particular dignity of someone who knows exactly where they need to be. She set her wine glass on the nearest table, untouched. She went home. On Monday morning, Olivia read Daniel Carter's personnel file. She did this quietly, before her 8 o'clock, with the door closed and her coffee cooling beside her keyboard. She told herself she was conducting due diligence on a strong performer. She told herself this with the practiced conviction of someone who understood the difference between a justification and a reason. The file was both thorough and insufficient. Bachelor's in Applied Mathematics from the University of Wisconsin. An MBA completed part-time over 4 years, which suggested either exceptional discipline or exceptional necessity. His performance reviews used words like methodical, insightful, and, in one from 3 years ago, the kind of quiet that turns out to be thinking. His direct manager, a director named Patricia Holloway, had recommended him for promotion twice. Both times, Daniel Carter had declined. Olivia read that line twice. Declined. Not negotiated. Not deferred. Declined. She pulled Patricia Holloway's number and called her directly, bypassing the conventional protocol of such inquiries. Patricia answered on the second ring and did not disguise her surprise. "He's one of the best analysts I've managed," Patricia said, when Olivia explained obliquely what she was asking. Genuinely. The kind of instinct you don't train into someone, but the promotions. A pause. He was very clear about it. The role would require travel, quarterly, off-sites, extended hours during peak cycles. He said Patricia stopped, as if reconsidering whether to continue. He said he had a standing appointment he wasn't prepared to be late for. What appointment? He didn't say. But Daniel Carter has left this building at 5 o'clock every single working day for the 4 years I've managed him. Not 5 to 10, not 5:05, 5, like he has a train to catch, or like something is waiting that matters more than whatever we're paying him for. Olivia thanked her and ended the call. She sat for a while in the way she rarely allowed herself to sit, not thinking about the next task, not scanning the next priority, but simply sitting with a question that didn't resolve into an action item. In the bullpen below her office, the floor was filling up with people starting their days, laptops opening, coffee being poured, the low hum of professional morning. She watched through the glass and found, after a moment, the back of Daniel Carter's head. He was at his desk already. He was reading something, an actual printed document, which was unusual enough that she noticed it and making notes in the margin with a pen. A pen. With actual handwriting. Olivia pressed her fingertips together and thought about a man who declined promotions and left at 5 o'clock every day and took handwritten notes and had looked at his watch at a party when the most powerful person in his professional life had asked him, however obliquely, if he was interested. She was not used to not understanding things. She found, somewhat to her alarm, that she did not hate the feeling. That evening, she stayed in the office until 7, which was early for her. She ordered Thai food that arrived lukewarm and ate it at her desk while reviewing a contract from the Singapore partnership. She finished the contract. She looked at the cold pad of green curry. She thought about 5 o'clock. She had not left before 6:30 on a voluntary basis in approximately 4 years. She had left earlier than that for a flight to London once, and twice for medical appointments she'd scheduled at 6 so as not to cut the day short. She recognized in this moment, somewhat absurd. She thought about what Patricia Holloway had said. A standing appointment he wasn't prepared to be late for. Not a meeting, not a client. A standing appointment. There was a particular kind of discipline in that the kind that came not from external accountability but from internal architecture. You could be late to a meeting because meetings could reschedule. You could skip a dinner because dinners could recur. But an appointment you made with yourself, with the weight of what it represented, that was the kind you kept, regardless of what the day had demanded. Olivia had a great many appointments. She kept all of them. She did not, she now understood, have any appointments that she would check her watch for at a gala. She told herself it was a coincidence. Fairfield Elementary was 3 blocks from the coffee shop where Olivia had taken a Tuesday afternoon meeting with a client from the real estate division. She had finished early. She was walking back to her car. The route she chose and she made, in some private recess of herself, no claim about this choice, past the school's main entrance at precisely 3:45 in the afternoon. The rain that week had gentled into something more considered. A fine mist that caught the autumn light and turned it silver. She recognized him from 40 feet. Daniel Carter stood on the sidewalk outside the school gate with both hands in his jacket pockets and his face tilted slightly upward, as if he were appreciating the weather rather than tolerating it. He was still in his work clothes, the same navy suit, slightly loosened at the collar. He was watching the doors. The doors opened. The girl who came through them was perhaps 6 years old, with dark hair pulled into 2 uneven braids and a backpack that appeared to be roughly 2/3 of her total volume. She spotted her father before he'd even turned toward the sound of the doors, and she covered the distance between them at a velocity that suggested she had been planning this reunion for the entire school day. She hit him at approximately hip height. He caught her without losing his footing, swung her up, and she buried her face in the side of his neck. Olivia stopped walking. She was not sure what she had expected. Something more complicated, perhaps. Something that would explain, or at least contextualize, the profile she had been building in her mind. Instead, she was watching a man hold his daughter in a mist of October rain with the particular steadiness of someone for whom this was not a performance, but the actual point. "Dad, I did the drawing today," the girl said, pulling back to look at him. Her voice carried across the sidewalk with the architectural confidence of children who have not yet learned that their volume is their own to manage. Mrs. Ellison put it on the board. "In the front? Yeah?" Daniel's voice was different outside the office. Warmer. Unhurried in a way that had nothing to do with the careful quality of his professional patience. "It's a drawing of our house, with the window light on at night. And the tree." She held up her hands to demonstrate the composition. Mrs. Ellison said it looked like someone was home. "That's because someone always is," Daniel said. He set her down, and she took his hand, and they began walking away from the school, the girl talking without punctuation about the drawing, and a boy named Oliver, who had knocked over the paint, water, and a song they were going to sing at the November concert. Daniel listened to all of it with the undivided attention most people reserved for things they considered consequential. Olivia stood on the sidewalk long after they had rounded the corner. The mist continued. A school bus idled past. A crossing guard in a fluorescent vest nodded at her, as if it were perfectly ordinary to stand still on a public sidewalk in a $1,200 coat. She thought about her apartment. The penthouse, with its curated silence and its view of the lake and its absence of any drawings on any surface. She thought about leaving work at 5 o'clock every day. She thought about the tree in a child's painting, lit from inside. She walked back to her car and sat in it for 7 minutes before starting the engine. 3 weeks later, the Harrison group nearly walked. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, with the particular swiftness of crises that have been quietly building for months. Olivia was in a board meeting when Margot sent the message. Harrison's COO, a meticulous man named Stuart Bellamy, had called to express what he termed foundational concerns about the data integrity of the reports Meridian had been providing. He wanted a call in 2 hours. He had used the phrase, exploring alternatives. Olivia excused herself and walked directly to the strategic accounts floor. The room she entered was a controlled form of panic. Patricia Holloway was on a call. 2 junior analysts were rebuilding the data chain in real time. 3 directors were arguing about the origin of the discrepancy in voices calibrated to sound calm while being neither. Daniel Carter was at his desk. He was not on a call. He was not arguing. He was looking at a printed spreadsheet and a legal pad covered in his handwritten notation, moving between the two with the focused deliberateness of someone who had already located the problem and was now building the explanation for it. Olivia walked over. "What is it?" she asked. He looked up. He did not perform surprise at her presence or realign his posture. Third-party data feed from the Henderson Index. There's a 12-day lag that wasn't disclosed in the integration documentation. It's been present for 2 quarters. Harrison's internal team ran their own comparative analysis last week, and the discrepancy flagged against their benchmark. Is the underlying analysis sound? Yes. The conclusions are correct. The timeline labeling on 3 reports is technically inaccurate by 12 days. He slid the legal pad toward her. I've drafted a corrected disclosure and a methodology note that explains why the analysis remains valid. It also explains why the lag, while undisclosed, has not affected any strategic recommendations Harrison has made on our basis. Olivia looked at the legal pad. The reasoning was airtight. How long have you known about this? I identified it 6 days ago, when I was running the Q4 projection model. I flagged it internally. He opened a folder and showed her an email thread that had, apparently, been misrouted by a departmental inbox restructure and had never reached the relevant director. She looked at the thread. She looked at him. You could have walked this upstairs yourself, she said. I followed the reporting structure, he said. The reporting structure lost your flag for 6 days. Yes, that's a process problem worth fixing. Not an argument for circumventing the structure every time the structure has a gap. Olivia picked up the legal pad. She used Daniel's drafted note as the basis for the call with Stuart Bellamy that afternoon. The call lasted 40 minutes. Harrison did not walk. By the end of the conversation, Stuart Bellamy had thanked her for the transparency and extended their engagement by 18 months. At 4:58, she walked back to the strategic accounts floor. Daniel Carter was shutting down his workstation. You saved that account, she said. He looked at her evenly. I identified a problem and drafted a solution. The saving was the call you ran. Don't minimize it. I'm not minimizing it. I'm accurately distributing credit. She wanted to say something about the promotion conversations, about what he was doing here, in this role, when the work he was clearly capable of could take him considerably further. Instead, she watched him put on his jacket. You're wasting your potential, she said, and regretted it immediately, not because it was wrong, but because it was the wrong frame. He paused in the act of buttoning his jacket. When he looked at her, there was something in it that was not unkind, but was entirely certain. I'm using it where it matters, he said. He picked up his bag and left. 5 o'clock, exactly. She asked Margot to pull the records and told herself she was conducting a standard wellness review of high-performing staff. The name was Claire Carter. The record was 3 years old. Olivia did not read far into it. She read enough. Pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed when Emily was 3 years old. 14 months from diagnosis to death. Claire Carter had been 31. Olivia closed the file. She sat for a long time looking at nothing in particular. She thought about the drawing of the house with the window light on. She thought about a man who left at 5 o'clock every day. She thought about a little girl who had lost her mother at the age of 3 and who now ran across wet sidewalks to reach her father and who painted houses that looked like someone was home. She thought about standing at a gala window with an untouched glass of wine, watching a man check his watch. She had read that moment, she now understood, entirely wrong. Not as a lack of interest. Not as rejection. As a calendar that had been made around something so specific and so essential that nothing else, not charm, not proximity to power, not the ambient pull of adult attraction, could interrupt it. Every day. 5 o'clock. Because there was someone waiting. Because there had always been someone waiting, and because the original reason for that precision, the urgency of a sick wife who needed to see him come through the door, who needed to know the day still ended with him there, that reason had changed form but not weight. Grief was like that. It did not evaporate. It redistributed. It settled into the architecture of a daily life and became the reason for the routine. And in that way, the person you were grieving lived inside the structure of your days long after they were gone. Daniel's 5 o'clock had started as a promise to Claire. It had continued as a promise to Emily. The form had changed. The weight had not. Olivia had spent 20 years building something worth arriving at. It had not once occurred to her to think about who would be waiting when she got there. She was still sitting with that thought at 6:30 when Margot knocked and asked if she needed anything before leaving. "No," Olivia said. "Thank you." "Margot, you've been in here since 4 without moving," Margot observed, with the particular brand of loyalty that expressed itself as gentle record-keeping. "I know. Do you need?" "I'm fine. Go home." After Margot left, Olivia stayed in her office until the cleaning crew came through at 7:15. When they arrived, she gathered her things and went home to the penthouse, which was, as it always was when she returned, exactly as she had left it. She left her office at 4:30 on a Wednesday. She told herself she had a headache, which was partly true. She told herself the day's work was substantively complete, which was also partly true. She did not tell herself that she was testing something, although that was the truest version. She walked to her car in daylight, which in October in Chicago still carried a shock of novelty. The parking garage had a quality of light she had never noticed before, the way the afternoon came in low and amber through the concrete openings. She drove home. In the elevator up to the penthouse, she thought about what she would do with the extra 90 minutes. She could review the Brennan proposal. She could call her friend Cecilia in New York, whom she hadn't spoken to in 3 weeks. She could do the stretching routine her doctor had recommended 6 months ago that she had never once done. She opened the door of her apartment. It was quiet in the way it was always quiet. She stood in the entry for a moment, coat still on, bag over her shoulder. The lake was bright through the windows. Everything was in its proper place. The apartment was beautiful, and she had chosen every single thing in it with intelligence and care. And it looked, in this particular light, at this particular hour, like the inside of a museum after closing time. She sat on the couch and looked at her hands. She thought about the dinner parties she declined, the calls with her sister that she rescheduled and eventually forgot to return, the man she had dated briefly 2 years ago who had told her, with genuine sadness rather than accusation, that he had begun to feel like an agenda item. She thought about Cecilia's children, who occasionally sent her drawings in the mail. Actual, physical drawings, in actual physical envelopes, which she placed on the refrigerator briefly, and then, feeling somehow unworthy of them, removed. She had built the architecture of a life in which there was nothing to interrupt, and no one to disappoint, and she had mistaken this for freedom. She had been wrong. She understood that now with a clarity that felt less like revelation than like reading the label on something she'd been holding the whole time. She had not built freedom. She had built an absence. And in the absence, nothing waited for her, not because nothing was worthy of waiting, but because she had, methodically and with great professional competence, removed all the reasons for anything to wait. She picked up her phone and scrolled to her sister's number. Her sister, Renata, lived in Portland with her husband and 2 sons and a large disorganized house that Olivia visited approximately once every 18 months and always left slightly earlier than planned because she did not know what to do with herself. Inside its comfortable chaos, Renata had never once criticized her for this. She simply left the door open. Olivia called her. Renata answered on the third ring with the unhurried ease of someone who had not been working at that hour. There was noise in the background, a television, something being dropped, a child's voice making an appeal. "Hey," Renata said, "hold on 1 second." And then, away from the phone. "Marcus, put that down. It's not yours. I don't care what Henry said." And then back. "Sorry. Hi." "Hi," Olivia said. A pause of the tender kind. "It's 8 o'clock on a Wednesday, Liv. I know. You never call on weeknights. I know that too." Another pause. Then Renata said, without inflection, "Are you okay?" Olivia looked at the lake. The lights of the city were on the water. "I think I've been making some decisions wrong," she said. "For how long?" "A while." "Okay," Renata said, with the specific gentleness of someone who has been waiting patiently for a conversation to become possible. "Tell me." Olivia talked for 40 minutes. Renata listened, asked 3 questions, made no judgments, and at the end said, "Okay," Olivia said. "I'll tell the boys. Marcus will attempt to show you a magic trick. It's not good, but you have to watch the whole thing." "I will." After she hung up, she felt lighter in the way you feel after setting down something you've been carrying so long you'd forgotten it had weight. She went to bed at 9:30, which was the earliest she had slept in years. In the morning, she made a decision. Fairfield Elementary's arts program had been cut from the district budget the previous spring. The school had been running its visual arts classes on donations of leftover supplies from a parent network and whatever the art teacher, a woman named Miss Pryor, could purchase from her own salary. Olivia knew this because she had asked. She had not asked in any official capacity. She had simply called the school's administrative office and spoken to a woman named Diane who handled development inquiries. And she had asked what the school needed. Diane, who had clearly been asked this rarely enough that it warranted a pause, had said that the arts program funding had been the most acute loss, followed by library acquisitions, followed by the equipment for the science room. Olivia made 3 transfers that afternoon. She listed the donor name as anonymous for the children. She told herself this was sufficient. The money would reach where it was needed, and that was the point, and whether anyone knew where it came from was irrelevant. She almost believed this. A month later, she received an email through the school's general inquiry form. It was from Miss Pryor. "Dear anonymous donor, I wanted to write to say that the restoration of our art supplies has changed something very particular in my classroom this semester. I have a student, I won't name her, of course, who has a genuine gift. She was working with the ends of pencils before. Last week, for the first time, she had real materials. The drawing she made with them is the best thing I've seen a 6-year-old make in 15 years of teaching. Whatever your reason, it was the right one." Olivia read the email 3 times. She wrote back, "Please tell her she should keep going." She did not sign it. 2 weeks later, she called the school and asked Diane whether they accepted classroom volunteers for administrative support. Diane, again, paused. She began going on Tuesday afternoons. The first Tuesday was awkward in the specific way that Olivia's professional life had, for 20 years, systematically protected her from. She was introduced to 3 teachers, shown a supply room, and asked to sort donation boxes, while a 3rd-grade class had music down the hall. She sorted the donation boxes and did not speak to anyone and drove home. The second Tuesday, a girl came into the supply room while she was there. She recognized the uneven braids before she registered anything else. Emily Carter was looking for construction paper for a project. She looked at Olivia with the frank assessment children deploy before social training intervenes. "You're very tall," Emily said. "I am," Olivia agreed. "Are you a teacher?" "No. I'm helping with the supply room." Emily considered this. "My dad helps with things too," she said. "He fixed the Hendersons' porch last month. He said if you can do a thing, you should. She found her construction paper and left. Olivia stood in the supply room for a long moment after she went. Something had shifted. She couldn't have described it in terms precise enough for a board presentation. It felt like the first correct answer to a question she hadn't known how to ask. Richard Blake had been at Meridian for 7 years, 3 of which he had spent believing he would be the one to run the technology division. Olivia knew this because it was the kind of thing you learned about people when you were the person who had gotten the role they wanted. She did not hold it against him. Ambition misdirected was a management problem, not a character flaw. She had managed it accordingly. What she had not anticipated was Richard choosing this particular month, with its particular vulnerabilities, to escalate from managed frustration to active interference. It began as a murmur. An executive assistant she trusted mentioned, neutrally, that Richard had been having long lunches with 2 of the board's outside advisors. Then Patricia Holloway told her, carefully, that a rumor was circulating on the senior director level, something about Olivia's personal involvement with a member of her staff, something about the implications for workplace governance. Olivia listened to this without expression. "Where is it coming from?" she asked. Patricia's pause said everything the words wouldn't. Richard had dinner with Gordon Ashby last week. Olivia spent 24 hours saying nothing. On the second day, Daniel came to her office. He knocked once, entered when she didn't respond, and closed the door behind him. He stood across from her desk in the way people stood when they had decided to say something difficult and were organizing the order of it. "I know what's circulating," he said. "I know that you know. I want to say something about it." "Daniel, I'm going to transfer divisions," he said. "Patricia has already agreed to facilitate it. It would remove any basis for, you're not going to do that." The certainty in her voice surprised them both. "Olivia, you're not going to reorganize your professional life around a rumor that Richard Blake manufactured to manage a grievance that has nothing to do with either of us." She leaned forward. "I have handled Richard Blake. I will handle Gordon Ashby. The rumor will not outlive the week, and you will stay in your department because you are excellent at your work, and because I am not in the habit of letting other people's bad faith rearrange the things that are working correctly." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "What are you going to do about Richard?" he asked. "I'm going to have a conversation with him," she said, "that he will remember as the day he decided to redirect his ambitions constructively. Will that actually work? It will work because I will make it work." She picked up her pen. He was quiet for a moment. "I know it isn't." He started to leave. "Daniel." He stopped. "Thank you for coming in. Most people wait to see which way it falls." He looked at her steadily. "You're not most situations," he said. He left. She picked up the phone and called Richard Blake's assistant to schedule a meeting. The conversation, when it happened, was quiet and specific, and it ended with Richard Blake understanding, with perfect clarity, that his future at Meridian would be shaped entirely by the quality of his contributions going forward. He thanked her. She thanked him. They shook hands. He did not create further problems. Emily Carter's school concert was a Tuesday evening in November. The invitation arrived. Daniel had written it by hand on a card with a small drawing on the front, which she realized with some delay had been made by Emily on a Monday. It said, "The second grade is performing. There will be hot chocolate in paper cups. If you'd like to come, we'd like you to." Olivia held the card for a long time. She had 6 things scheduled for Tuesday evening. She moved all 6 of them. The gymnasium of Fairfield Elementary had been decorated with paper stars and silver streamers, the kind of decoration that was indisputably made by small hands and was, because of this, more beautiful than anything produced by a professional event planner. The folding chairs filled quickly. Olivia found a seat in the 3rd row beside a man with a sleeping toddler on his shoulder and a woman who was already crying preemptively. Daniel arrived 7 minutes before it started and found her without any apparent difficulty. He sat down beside her. "You came," he said. "I said I would." People say they will. I moved 6 meetings, Olivia said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, the real one, the one she had noticed at the gala, the one that required no maintenance. Thank you. The second grade took the stage in 2 rows, wearing the mismatched formality of children who have been told this is a special occasion without being told what that means exactly. Emily was in the front row, left side. She scanned the audience with the systematic focus of someone conducting a visual sweep, and when she found her father, she raised her hand briefly in a wave that was entirely dignified for a 7-year-old. Then Emily found Olivia. She did not wave again. She simply looked, with the frank and certain recognition of a child who catalogs things. Then she looked at her father. Then back at Olivia. She smiled. The second grade sang 4 songs. One was in Spanish. One was a round that went slightly irregular in the middle and recovered itself with the kind of collective improvisational grace that only children and jazz musicians manage. The third was a slow arrangement of something old, something that in different hands might have been melancholy, but in the mouths of 22 7-year-olds became simply true. A song about home, about the particular sound of a door opening, about the ordinary shape of love. Olivia listened to it and looked at her hands in her lap. She was not a person who cried in public. She was not a person who cried anywhere, generally. The song made her throat close. She pressed her lips together and breathed and did not cry, and Daniel, beside her, said nothing and did not look at her, and somehow this was the most considerate thing anyone had done for her in a very long time. After the concert, there was, as promised, hot chocolate in paper cups. Olivia stood with Daniel and Emily in the gymnasium corridor while the crowd worked its way toward the folding table, and Emily gave a detailed performance critique of her own concert that was simultaneously accurate and unstintingly complimentary to her colleagues. Oliver was flat on the third song, Emily said, with the judicial gravity of someone who had studied the matter. But he was looking at his mom. I think that's why. Hard to sing when you're looking at someone you love, Daniel said. Emily considered this. Is that true for everything, or just singing? He looked at Emily. Then, briefly, almost without intending to, at Olivia. Probably most things, he said. They walked out together into the November evening. The mist had returned, softer now, without the October edge. Emily walked ahead of them by a few feet with the confident independence of a child who knows her radius exactly and never exceeds it. She's extraordinary, Olivia said. She is. No modesty in it. Simply agreement. She's also in the habit of making judgments about people that turn out to be correct. She decided she liked you after the supply room. She told you that? She said you listened to her like you meant it. She finds that unusual in adults. Olivia was quiet. So do I, Daniel said. They walked another half-block in comfortable silence. Emily had found a puddle and was navigating it with elaborate care, 1 foot on either side. She looks like her, Olivia said. She had not intended to say it, but the evening was gentle and it came out. Daniel did not flinch. The braids, yes. Claire wore her hair that way when she wasn't working. He watched Emily negotiate the puddle successfully and move on to the next investigation. Emily doesn't remember her well. She was 3, but she knows her from photographs and from what I tell her, which I try to make good. What do you tell her? He considered. That her mother was funny in the way that catches you off guard. That she was a morning person, annoyingly so. That she would have been at every one of these concerts and would have been the one crying before the first song finished. She sounds like someone to have loved. She was, he said simply. Emily had circled back to them, holding a small stone she'd found in the gutter. It's quartz, she announced. Almost certainly, Daniel agreed. Olivia, do you collect rocks? I've never tried. You should start, Emily said, with the generous authority of the recently converted. I have 14. Dad made me a shelf. She placed the stone in her coat pocket and resumed walking, satisfied. Daniel and Olivia followed. The street was quiet. The lamps were coming on. The hot chocolate place was at the end of the block, lit warmly from inside. The kind of small establishment that looked exactly like what it was. "You moved 6 meetings," Daniel said, as they reached the door. "I told you." "I know. I'm noting it." She looked at him. "Is that different from something else?" "Yes," he said. He held the door. "It's different from everything else." The board meeting was in December. It was a formal review, the kind that happened twice a year and required documentation and presentations and the careful choreography of institutional confidence. Olivia had given 37 of these in her career. She had never given one while feeling, as she did now, that something else she valued more was scheduled for 3:30. She had prepared, as she always did, with a thoroughness that left no gaps. The revenue numbers were strong. The methodology improvements she'd implemented after the Harrison situation had already generated measurable results across 11 client accounts. The division headcount had grown by 14% and attrition was at a 4-year low. She had slides for all of it. What she had not prepared was the particular feeling of sitting across from a conference table full of men and women who were evaluating her life's work while she was, simultaneously, evaluating something they couldn't see. She delivered the presentation with her usual precision. Revenue at 112% of projection. The Harrison account retained and expanded. A new methodology for client reporting that eliminated the data lag issue and had already been implemented across 11 accounts. She answered questions. She redirected 2 lines of inquiry that were structurally loaded, and she did this without defensiveness and without the performance of patience that conceals its absence. At one point, Gordon Ashby, who had the expression of a man who had hoped for a different outcome than the one in front of him, asked whether she felt her personal life had created any distractions in the second half of the year. The room took on the particular stillness of institutional breath-holding. Olivia looked at him for a moment. "My personal life," she said, "has made me more effective." She did not elaborate. She moved to the next slide. Gordon Ashby did not ask a follow-up question. The meeting concluded at 2:40. She walked out of the boardroom and took the elevator to her office. She sat at her desk and looked at the lake, which in December had turned the color of pewter and moved with a slow authority that was difficult to argue with. Margot appeared in the doorway. "You have the Brennan call at 4, and the Singapore team wants to reschedule their 3:15 to. Move everything," Olivia said. Margot stopped. In 4 years, she had not been given this instruction at 2:40 on a working day. "Everything? The Brennan call can happen Thursday. Singapore can have Friday morning. Move everything between now and end of day." Margot looked at her with the particular expression of someone updating a very long-running assumption. "Should I give a reason?" "Tell them I have a standing appointment," Olivia said, "that I'm not prepared to be late for." Something shifted in Margot's face. Not surprise exactly. Something warmer. "I'll take care of it," she said. Olivia put on her coat. She had spent 20 years measuring success by what she had built. She was still proud of what she had built. She had not become confused about that. The division was real, and the work was real, and the people whose careers had developed under her leadership were real, and she did not dismiss any of it. Achievement was not the problem. Exclusivity was the problem. The operating assumption that achievement was the only currency that mattered, that everything outside the professional frame was deferral rather than life. She thought about Claire Carter, who had been 31 and had not gotten to choose her deferral. She thought about Emily painting a house with the lights on. She thought about a man who had learned, the hard way and too young, that 5 o'clock was a commitment to something irreplaceable, and who had organized his entire life around that knowledge ever since. At 3:15, she stood up, put on her coat, and told Margot she was leaving for the day. Margot looked at the clock. She did not say anything, which was the most eloquent thing she could have done. The school was quiet when she arrived. She was early. She stood at the gate in the December cold and watched the street and thought about nothing specific, which was new for her and which felt, surprisingly, like something she might learn to do. A crossing guard she had seen before, A broad-shouldered man named Gerald, who wore the fluorescent vest with the dignity of someone who understood the importance of the post, raised a hand at her. She raised her hand back. She had been coming often enough to be recognized. This was not a small thing. The door opened at 3:40. Emily came through it at the velocity she always deployed for this reunion, and she pulled up short when she saw Olivia at the gate. She looked at Olivia. She looked at the school door behind her. She looked at Olivia again. "You're here," Emily said. "I am. Dad's coming." "I know." Emily processed this with the executive function of a child running a fast probability model. Then she walked over and took Olivia's hand with the matter-of-fact directness of someone who has decided and acted on the decision, and sees no reason to discuss it further. They stood at the gate together. "Is today special?" Emily asked, after a moment. Olivia considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "I think so." "Why?" "I moved some things around so I could be here." Emily looked up at her with Claire's dark eyes in a face that was learning, daily, what it intended to become. "That's what Dad does," she said. "He moves everything so he can be here." "I know," Olivia said. "I noticed." Emily nodded, as if this were a reasonable response, and turned back to watch the gate. Daniel arrived at 3:44 slightly early, she noted, which meant he'd left the office before 5 and he saw them from down the block, his daughter and this woman standing together at the gate in the December cold. He slowed his pace for exactly 1 step, then continued. When he reached them, he looked at Olivia with an expression she had not seen on him before. Something careful with a door open in it. "You're here," he said. "You said that already," Emily told him, with authority. Olivia smiled. It was the real kind, unscheduled, uncalibrated. "I had a question," she said. "All right, at the gala. I asked if my age was a problem. You didn't answer." The corner of his mouth moved. "I had to leave. You did. But now you don't." He looked at her for a moment in the December light. Emily had noticed a leaf on the sidewalk and was inspecting it with the intensity she brought to all investigations, and was therefore temporarily occupied. "No," he said. "Your age was never the problem." "What was?" He was quiet for a moment. Not the evasive quiet. The thinking kind. "Timing," he said. "The timing wasn't right. You were in one life and I was in another, and the distance between them was the kind that doesn't close by wanting. And now?" He looked at Emily, still crouched over her leaf. He looked at Olivia. "You're standing at a school gate in December," he said. "That's a different kind of answer." Emily stood up. "It's a sycamore leaf," she announced. "I'm keeping it." "Obviously," Daniel said. "Can we get hot chocolate?" Emily asked. She directed this at both of them with the diplomatic neutrality of someone who had already decided the answer and was asking as a courtesy. They walked down the block together in the December cold. Emily between them with the sycamore leaf, the city making its usual noise around them, and the winter light going amber on the shop windows, and the bare trees and the sidewalk that was damp from an earlier rain. Nothing had been resolved in the ways that paperwork resolves things. There were no contracts, no certitudes. There was a man who kept his promises and a woman who was learning what to promise, and a small person between them carrying a leaf with the gravity it deserved. Olivia did not check her phone. She walked. Somewhere behind her, the office was still there, and the board and the numbers and the work she was proud of and would return to tomorrow. But not now. Now the light was gold on the street and the hot chocolate was 2 blocks away, and someone was talking about the precise number of points on a sycamore leaf, and the world, for the length of this walk, was the size it needed to be. She thought, briefly, about the question she had asked at a party in October. "Is my age a problem?" She had meant it several ways when she asked it, as curiosity, as vanity, as the particular vulnerability of a powerful woman testing the temperature of a room she could not fully control. She had not known, when she asked it, that it would become the question that opened something. She understood now that age had nothing to do with it. It had been about what she was oriented toward, what she was building, and for whom, and whether anyone would be there when she arrived. The answer was getting clearer. Emily reached the door of the coffee shop and pulled it open with both hands and looked back at them with the expression of someone who has been patient long enough. "Come on," she said. They came.